Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luhr, and today we're crossing over back to London to catch up with Damian Willoughby, which most of you would know probably from his long days with Manchester City or the City Football Group here, and obviously various other roles before that in the world of football, which we will all be going to be talking about in a bit, but is currently now the new VP of Partnerships at EA, Electronic Arts, and everyone knows what they're doing. So we'll get to that later. But first, let's play around and see all the fun stuff Damian did during his football career, which to some degree, I guess, started at the University of Liverpool, where you did an MBA in football. Tell us a bit about it, Damian.
Hey, Marcus, great to catch up, and thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I guess a sort of formative part of my career was certainly, well, the first stage in my career. I got back from actually, I was on a soccer scholarship in the US, so I came back to the UK after spending 4 years in the States playing and studying, and I had to get a job, and I ended up working in the automotive business for a year, which was an interesting education, but certainly taught me very quickly that I didn't want to spend the rest of my career in that space or industry. So at the time, the University of Liverpool just launched. I think I was the second cohort, but was effectively the first postgraduate program in football studies. So it was engineered for or targeted towards people who had an interest in kind of moving into the commercial business administrative base of football. So it was very nascent, but felt like a good place to hopefully get a platform into what was, I guess, the sort of professionalizing football industry in the UK at that point, as there was more money flowing into the game, and there was a desire and a need to kind of, I guess, upskill across the industry. So I certainly benefited more from timing than ability.
Yeah, makes sense. So you played college football in the US, is it?
Yeah, I did actually. I guess like most young boys and now girls, fortunately, in the UK, growing up, I fell in love with football, played to a pretty decent level when I was younger, kind of professional ecosystem as a schoolboy at Arsenal and Norwich and Luton. And then I was an apprentice at a YTS at Northampton Town, which at the time was languishing at the kind of foot of the football pyramid, but was a valuable 2 years in terms of teaching some life experiences. And then fortunately was given an opportunity to go to the US and play at a reasonable level and also get an education, which obviously anyone who's spent time in the US knows that that's a pretty lucrative and attractive option to explore. So I was fortunate and had a great time, but came back to the UK and began kind of the steps into the football business that had always kind of captured my attention, and fell in love with the set of young boys.
You obviously turned your passion of playing or being in football definitely into a career. Fantastic. Well, that's cool to hear. Now let's talk a bit about then the first job coming out of your MBA program, which was, as far as I can see here, head of sponsorship for the Rangers Football Club, where you spent a pretty good 7 years from the early 2000s. So how do you get from Liverpool to Glasgow?
Yeah, it was an interesting kind of process. I guess like most postgraduate programs, there was a component around doing an internship and spending some time, I guess, out in the field doing the job. And I was fortunate enough to get what was originally a 3-month window placement at Rangers that luckily for me turned into 8 years. And ironically, my mum is from Glasgow, and ironically, all my family are huge Celtic fans. So again, anyone that knows anything about the dynamic of the old firm will realise that that's quite a difficult divide to cross at times. But so I actually ended up at Rangers, and I was really lucky too, because at that time it was a hugely respected club from a commercial and business standpoint. I think at the time I left, it was maybe generating revenues of about 50 million, but in Deloitte's, actually by the time when I joined around 2000, they were about 15th in Deloitte's annual rich list. Now, if they'd had the TV income of the Premier League, they would have been third behind Manchester United. I think we're just generating about 110 million or something like that at the time. So it was a phenomenal football club, great environment to kind of learn the commercial trade of how clubs operate, both from a, ticketing, hospitality, media, sponsorship, licensing perspective. Fortunately worked for an amazing leader and CEO and a guy called Martin Bain, who our paths recently actually crossed again in the Indian Super League, and someone I have a huge amount of respect for and is a wonderful operator. But he was a great mentor during that period, and I said, I was given the ability to learn and grow and develop in Rangers. And I think the thing I take most away from the experience was, they a very traditional, historic club, but has a set of values. So there was a football kind of industry standard, and there was the Rangers way of doing things. And I think it was a great experience for me, and one that I look back on very fondly.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a great start into the industry. Now, as earlier, this is sort of, we're talking the year 2000 to 2007 when you were there, and this is still, as you said, somewhat early days. We had a club of that level making 50 million pounds, I guess, in revenue, and even the big clubs where we're only in the 100 million here, and not what we're talking about now in the hundreds of millions. When you were selling at that time, was it really mostly a local sale, or were you already having conversations with companies from around the world, or how would you sort of describe it to what you've obviously did afterwards with other clubs like City and Chelsea, etc.?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty unique experience because, again, the dominant position that the old firm enjoys in Scottish football and the sensitivities that historically surrounded that rivalry mean that it is quite a kind of unique process to go to market for your major assets front of shirt. So at the time, we were fortunate enough to bring on, NTO, I guess, was the sort of first major brand that had a relationship across both properties. Then we worked with Carling through 2 or 3 contract cycles where we were the front of shirt partner. So it was quite a unique set of dynamics around that, because effectively you were going to market with your biggest rival, which I don't think there are too many places in the world where that happens. So we would work very closely with our counterparts at Celtic in packaging up the proposal and the proposition and going to market. And I guess in answer to your question, it was mostly a domestic focused play, right, on Scotland, with some, I guess, spillage into kind of the broader UK market. But I think, what I reflect back on at that time is that, and I think it's a challenge that a lot of the big European clubs in smaller European media markets have wrestled with and continue to wrestle with. Back in the early days of my tenure at Rangers, we could compete with most clubs because we had 55,000 people flowing through the stadium on a weekly basis. So the economic profile and complexion of teams in those big clubs in smaller markets, so whether that's in Scotland or Portugal or Holland or Belgium or some of the Nordic markets, you could compete because your major revenue stream was anchored around match day. Right. As the Premier League started to really flex its commercial prowess and grow, obviously the core revenue streams moved from match day across to media and effectively commercial / sponsorship. So at that point, there was this sort of chasm that started to open up, because if you're in a media market of 5 million people, as Rangers and Celtic are, the media income that you can generate out of that domestic market and thus internationally is greatly reduced. So, the sponsorship play was absolutely a domestic focused approach and kind of strategy.
Yeah, that all makes complete sense. Now, you said something interesting, and I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. You were cooperating or working hand in hand with Celtic to sell a package for both clubs? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, so we had, again, given the history and the rivalry that exists, there was a perception, certainly from a brand buyer side, that you really couldn't align with one because you would alienate the other. Again, the dominance of the two clubs, you're talking about probably 80% of the Scottish market, right? So, right. It got to the stage and where there was, great leadership again from the respective owners and CEOs and Martin and, the leadership at Celtic were very open-minded and collaborative. So it made sense that we would coordinate and work hand in hand to try and secure the best possible partnership for both clubs. And it made sense for the buyer of the brand as well, right? So
it makes sense from that point of view. Obviously, like you said, this is the biggest rivalry, or one of, if you think of rivalries around the world of football, this is about as big as it gets. But on the commercial side, like you're saying, rather than thinking, hey, we need to continue that rivalry, which we have on the pitch, off the pitch, we better align ourselves, because otherwise people have to choose, and that becomes hard, which is sort of basically what you're saying, right? That is actually, I love that. That's a really clever thinking process there.
Yeah, I guess US sports have always done a better job at this, of the sort of collective approach and value to drive into all of its clubs and stakeholders, whereas obviously, European football is tribal in terms of support. So it's a lot harder to kind of reconcile that with the kind of fan base and I guess media. But certainly, it worked for us with the old firm, with Carling, who I think they did. I think they kind of committed to 3 contract cycles of being on the front of the shirt and really helped them establish their brand in Scotland against the sort of legacy traditional McEwen's brand. And we actually had a number of other partners, Honda. T-Mobile had a relationship across both clubs. So we certainly felt the commercial uplift of being collaborative versus being protectionist to our own kind of territory and turf.
Yeah, like I said, it's the first time I hear this, but it makes total sense, and I really like that approach. That's nice. I think others should think about that too. When you have these sort of rivalries, you don't have to be always rivals from a financial point of view or from a marketing point of view. I like that. Nice. Now, before we move on, sort of, I guess, to the next one, which is obviously Chelsea. We'll talk about in a minute. Just give me some ideas of numbers, if you can, if you remember any of the deals. So, what deal size are we talking about? What is a jersey going for at those times?
For the old firm, for Rangers?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we were probably yielding for the front of the shirt from recollection, a couple of £1 million a year, which again, if you go back to the previous point around, the actually Rangers business was quite mature outside of the sort of the media rights business. So we were competitive on sponsorship. Retail was always competitive with the biggest clubs, given again the sort of the hugely passionate fan base that bought replica product and licensed product in droves. So our kind of business outside of media was really comparable to the top Premier League clubs at that time. Again, if we'd have had Premier League media income, we would have been second behind Manchester United at the time in terms of the Deloitte money list. But again, it just accentuates and amplifies the challenge of, as the game pivoted more to revenue generated from media, Rangers, Celtic, Porto, Benfica, Ajax, Bruges or other clubs from similar type markets. That's the challenge, that you can't squeeze the same quantum of media value when your audience is significantly smaller.
And the assumption is then Celtic obviously would end up more or less with a similar deal because you guys are
correct. Yeah,
in a similar fashion, right? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it was comparable. There may have been a little bit of nuance, but broadly it was the same.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that's sort of obviously spending 7 years there. It's a nice long time, and the club win a couple of championships during that time. I have to admit, I don't follow that closely to recall that.
Yeah, we were pretty successful. Again, it was actually a pretty strong and good rivalry between essentially Alex McLeish and Martin O'Neill, who I've subsequently spent a bit of time with, who are 2 great football people and men, and were great managers. And there was a bit of ebb and flow. So Helicopter Sunday was kind of Rangers' big moment. Celtic obviously had Seville and had a very strong team. So it was it was a good kind of boxing match with 2 heavyweights slugging it out. And but we did manage to win some silverware, and obviously Rangers has gone on. I think is actually the most successful team in world football. I think it's won 55 league titles. So it shows, and this year I think is the 125th anniversary. So yeah, I have an affection and affinity towards Rangers. Said it's a proper football club, but the football in Scotland is is hugely popular, and Glasgow is a wonderful footballing city, a bit like Liverpool or London or other places in the UK.
You want to share that with your mother then, so that you don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, well, in true Scottish fashion, my uncles slowly welcomed me back into the family when they realised I could get them tickets for Old Firm games. So I was welcomed back with open arms once they realised they had access to tickets.
There we go. There's always a benefit somewhere there. Right, let's talk Chelsea. Mr. Abramovich took over the club in 2003, and you joined there in what I can see here in 2007 as head of platinum sponsorship first, and then later on head of sponsorship international development. You spent 3 years in with Chelsea. Now, again, somewhat assuming it sort of gives you a chance to come back to London, which you mentioned you were originally from. And of course, at that time already, I guess Chelsea is starting to do really well. I just looked it up, the season 2007 to 2010 when you were there. They had a couple of runner-ups in the league and even on Champions League level. Eventually, they won the league in the double, I think, in the 2009 and 10 season. So that's sort of when you were there. So the club is doing well, winning stuff. So that's and now you're dealing with with a league which has already a fairly large international profile. So, compare a bit the differences and what you were doing then at Chelsea.
Yeah, it was a really clearly exciting time at Chelsea. As you referenced, Roman purchased the club in 2003, and I guess probably in the modern era it was the first real kind of football club to kind of undergo a major kind of transformation, right? From being, maybe not quite as competitive as it should have been, to really with a massive influx and infusion of capital to build a squad that was capable of competing for Premier League titles and Champions Leagues. And so I think it was, everyone in the football industry at the time was probably somewhat taken aback given the scale and size of A, the investment, and B, the ambition. Because again, football, from my experience, can be quite a traditional space, and thinking about the business or the industry or clubs in a different way is not always welcomed by the established heritage brands, right? So Chelsea was a really exciting place to join. Peter Kenyon had obviously, taken over and was at the wheel and was doing a phenomenal job. And Peter's, like Martin, my former boss at Rangers, someone who I count as a kind of mentor and a friend, and someone that I'm still close to and speak to on a regular basis. But unbelievable leader, had a great vision. Did really well at kind of articulating and galvanizing the group at Chelsea behind his vision. And I really enjoyed working. As you pointed out, Marcus, that the club was starting to enjoy some success and on pitch and was sort of elevating its profile internationally. And I guess our job coming in on the commercial side was to help, leverage that by growing it, the partnership business, working with brands that would, add value to the club was trying to do, certainly in key markets and geographies around the world. But it was a really exciting place to be. And I think I probably, through the transition from Rangers to Chelsea, you get a sense again of the sort of meteoric kind of growth trajectory that the Premier League was on, and Chelsea was certainly at the forefront of that, and just a different scale of proposition, and takes you into places and spaces that, with the greatest respect to, Rangers, as we discussed, Rangers was very much a kind of domestic / UK play. This was a UK / global opportunity that was exciting and capturing the imagination of brands and fans around the world. So it was a really enjoyable time.
So I'm assuming we're going from single digit millions or £1 million into the tens of millions, or what sort of were the numbers you guys were playing with at that time already?
Yeah, I think that kind of quantum shift is probably about right. I mean, we were able to pretty materially grow, I think, as the industry was doing generally, and Manchester United were doing a pretty good job at that, right? Sort of growing a portfolio of partners outside and beyond just the traditional kind of front of shirt technical partner. We were seeing significant growth in the value of the Chelsea platform, because people were excited by what we were doing on the pitch. And then clearly, again, London is such a magnet for international business, trade, tourism. So it was an exciting period, and Jose Mourinho thrown into the mix was always a good charismatic kind of.
Yeah, he was there, and then you had Ancelotti as well, right at the end. So you obviously had some high-profile coaches too.
I think I joined, and Jose. This was Jose's first spell. I think left shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Then there was Ancelotti, Hiddink, Scolari for a period of time. But some pretty iconic global football managers, and I guess
and players.
And clearly a phenomenal squad that was constructed with Lampard and Drogba and Cech and all those other, Chelsea legends that went on to achieve so much success on the pitch. So, it was a really, really enjoyable period of time, and also a great group of people there. So I said Peter was a phenomenal leader, and a number of colleagues who are now lifelong friends. We worked together, Ben Wells, Andy Dart, Ed Connor, people of that ilk who have all gone on to enjoy successful careers in football. And it was just a good group of people committed to trying to do something different. And we worked hard and played hard, but we had an amazing journey together.
Who was on the jersey at that time? Was it Samsung, or who was sort of your
Samsung? Yes. So Samsung, which was a really, really successful partnership. I guess pre going on the front of shirt at Chelsea, there was a perception that the Samsung brand was a kind of Me Too kind of inferior product quality, which was totally wrong. They made amazing products, both consumer electronics, TVs, phones, washing machines, dishwashers, etc. But I think what Chelsea did for them clearly was give them a global platform that they could leverage. But it did a phenomenal job at pivoting the perception of the brand from being a sort of Me Too Asian copycat tech brand to absolutely a premium, top of the range, so consumer electronics business and organization. So
and that's a great point, because unless you as old as we are, you think Samsung is an amazing brand, right? As if you think of the brand now, but the Korean brands, whether it's LG Electronics or Samsung or Hyundai, weren't always seen as that sort of premium or as that brand they are now. After they spent all the millions of dollars, of course, in sponsorship, whether it's Hyundai and FIFA World Cup, and of course Samsung also being an Olympic partner, etc. Right? That's really where a lot of that brand affinity was driven. And I do remember when Chelsea did the deal that it was a big deal at that time. I actually had several conversations with Samsung people here in Asia, about helping them how to leverage it or what to do with it. And it was, and the part which was interesting, and again, I'd love to hear your thoughts from, being on on the site where you were selling it. Here in Asia, we had a couple of people I remember talking to, and they were always like, that's headquarter who signed all these deals. But, for my market, I don't know, let it be Singapore or Malaysia or Indonesia, wherever, we're actually not using it. We're usually doing something else. So there wasn't always that automatic, like, oh, great, we signed up this big club and now we're going to all leverage it. How was your perception too when you were working with these brands? How easy was it to really get a global consensus versus, okay, there's a couple of people at headquarters who think this is a great idea and then they kind of run with it?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good and smart question, Marcus. I mean, I think that's always a bit of the challenge when you have global brands that really have significant material business across the world, right? So there's always a little bit of kind of the not invented here syndrome, and you get some of the regions will push back. I do think you need, I guess, the perfect storm or the perfect process is you get the regions buy into it through the negotiation and through the sales process, so that everyone is committed and kind of aligned around this is the right property for us to invest in. That's not always easy for me, the buy or the sell side, but I think that's the perfect storm. If you can bring the regional heads or marketing CMOs into the process, that they have visibility and input and can help craft and shape the partnership, I always have found, in my experience, generates the best results, because then, as I said, it sort of mitigates the not created or invented here syndrome that sometimes happens in big global organizations. But we with the sort of Chelsea Samsung relationship, is interesting to hear your take, given your vast experience and expertise in Asia as well. I mean, I think we did a pretty good job at kind of coordinating the geographies and getting them to activate and leverage. But clearly some regions will galvanize behind the opportunity and the platform more than others. But
that's normal.
I think if you can address it in the part of the process where you're crafting the partnership is maybe a different way to think about it. I think that yields the best results, and that's what we started to do. I'm sure we'll come on to it. Kind of Manchester City and CFG, we were able to make sure that there was proper and true alignment on the brand side, and everyone was excited and enthused by the opportunity. But that was again a slightly different model and time. But I think that's the optimal way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're sort of, what we're talking about here isn't sort of Chelsea specific. Clearly some of the things you end up doing later on with City is similar, right? Again, you were in a similar role there, selling global partnerships, and so this is obviously your space, really, the commercial side of partnersshps. While you were there at Chelsea, is there a particular one you kind of you have in your head you worked on, which you're proud of? We could talk about for a minute.
Actually, a brand that's probably close and dear to you, Singer, which is obviously an iconic Thai beer brand. We constructed a relationship with them, which actually still exists at Chelsea to this day. So it was one that was, phenomenally successful Thai Asian brand that was looking to globalize. So they actually invested and had partnerships with Chelsea, Manchester United, Ferrari. So they really, again, bought in and were committed to utilizing sport as a way to elevate the profile of the brand, educate people on what a phenomenal taste experience and product it is. and, ultimately help drive international sales, which it did for them,
Right.
And I think, for most people in Europe, they'll be very familiar with the Singer brand now. And, again, was a great partnership, great people, really enjoyed working with the family. And they said it's nice to see that it still exists and it's still a relationship that's endured at Chelsea to this day.
Yeah, well, I'm in Bangkok now, and you're right. There's still actually some buildings here, some big billboards where you have the Chelsea Singer brand there, which is great. So, again, let's stick to that for a minute. Singer beer, again, anyone who's been to Thailand will probably recognize it. Doesn't mean it's, everyone would have heard of it. Obviously, it's a very large beer brand here in the country. And had, and as you already said, kind of used, especially football, as a springboard to go global. Whether then also the pouring partner, so that you would, it would also get it at the stadium, or?
Yeah, so they built out a production manufacturing hub in Germany, and it supplied product into the UK. So they were a pouring partner at the stadium, both Stamford Bridge and Old Trafford, and again generated significant exposure to the brand, but obviously the opportunity to taste, sample, and try the product, which hopefully people liked, and then continued drinking when they saw it in Tesco's or Sainsbury's or other retailers in the UK. Right, so right. I think the other thing that was really interesting, Mark, and it's funny you talk about the big outdoor media sites that are still visible in Bangkok. I mean, they also did a phenomenal job at helping Chelsea penetrate, as you know better than most people, a football crazy market in Thailand where Premier League football is so all consuming. It really helped, again, kind of elevate and cement Chelsea's position as a brand versus some of the more heritage historic brands in that market, like a United and a Liverpool, which again, I know is close to your heart at the moment.
Yeah, they're coming here in a few days for a big match.
Yes, well, I'm sure it'll be a phenomenal event, given again the level of support that both of those clubs enjoy there, and and certainly I think Chelsea's probably comparable to that now, given a lot of the work that they did in the region and in the market, but thanks in no small part to how much Singer activated domestically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, this is what they call the Red War. Maybe next time we need to bring the blue guys out, right? Chelsea and Man City here. Why not?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm sure both of those clubs would be interested in coming, given again the level of support that they enjoy in Thailand.
Absolutely. Well, let's move a bit along here, because before we get to City, there was a couple of little stops in between here. I think you spent a few years in the US with a group called James Grant Sports Group. Talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so I kind of did 3 years at Chelsea. There was a bit of a kind of leadership change, and it felt like the right time to move on. I guess my ambition from when I started working in football is kind of, I always felt and wanted that I could do a good job at a CEO level. So kind of being a CEO of a club had always kind of been in my longer term kind of career plan and thought and process. And clearly I felt I had some pretty good experience on the business commercial side of how, major football properties and clubs operate, but I didn't have any real visibility into the football side of the operation. And clearly for any club, the biggest area of investment and cost is on the football side. So I was given an opportunity to join a small agency, ironically, again, talking about kind of serendipity of relationships and people you meet on your journey. When I was 16 when I was 18, I met a gentleman by the name of Mick Maguire, who was at the time the number 2 in the PFA. And he helped me go to the US on a soccer scholarship. And then years later, he was working for James Grant in the UK in their talent representation agency business. And they were looking for someone to join the US operation. And that's how that kind of opportunity came about. And so at the time with my wife and eldest daughter to Washington, D.C., where James Grant was based. And they were probably one of 2 dominant kind of agencies in the US soccer landscape. And, we had at the time, I think, sort of 16 of the 24 from the national team squad, the likes of Clint Dempsey and Carlos Bocanegra and Josie Altidore and Mo Adu and others. So the sort of business model was predicated on identifying US talent and then migrating them to Europe, where aspirationally they wanted to play, and obviously the economic rewards were greater for them and also the agency. So I joined the agency, did that for a couple of years. I think I realized pretty quickly that the agency business wasn't really like Jerry Maguire. It was you have to be a certain type of individual to really excel. And I was really amazed, certainly on the talent side, that you have to be this combination of father figure, best friend, psychologist, lawyer, accountant. You have to provide all of these kind of skills and viewpoints and expertise, and it just wasn't for me. That again, certain people are phenomenal and brilliant at it, but it really wasn't in my wheelhouse. But that being said, it did give me great exposure and insight into how you manage and represent talent and the costs involved in player recruitment and player contracts and player endorsement deals. So it was a good experience. It was a great learning, but ultimately I realized pretty quickly it wasn't a space in the broader industry that I really wanted to kind of double down on.
Right. No, interesting. So that swings us back to City, I guess, which dangled a carrot here to bring you back to the UK. Now we're in the year sort of 2013. Again, the new ownership with Sheikh Mansour has been around now for a couple of years. I think he came in 2008, right? If I bought it from a buddy here in Thailand, Thaksin.
Yeah.
And so, again, the club is obviously another sort of Chelsea, some parallels there. A lot of money is pouring in. Club is doing well. And now you're coming in here again, on the ground floor there in the sales space. I believe in Manchester City Football Club. Before later on, obviously you have roles as head of global partnership. Then you're going into Asia Pacific as VP, and down the line we're landing here at CEO of City Football India, and we'll get to a couple of these stops sort of step by step here. But tell us the transition, I guess, coming back from the US. Back to the UK.
Yeah, I guess to the point around the talent and the agency and the representation space, I realized wasn't for me, and I think it just crystallized in my head that being rights holder, property side in a club environment was much more aligned with probably my skills and my experience and my ambitions. So the opportunity came about to join Manchester City. Again, timing in life is everything. I guess to your point, the club had been acquired by Sheikh Mansour back in 2008. Again, hugely ambitious project. Phenomenal leadership that was brought in to help kind of craft and shape and then deliver against this vision. So, again, I have nothing but huge respect and admiration for Khaldoon. He's a tremendous leader. The board that exists at Manchester City, again, is a phenomenally talented and committed group in, Simon Pearce and Marty Edelman and John McBeath, and, really well-respected, credible, smart, global business executives. And so I joined in 2013. The club had started to enjoy some success, I guess, sort of characterised by Sir Alex's comments around the noisy neighbours. But we were, starting to make an impression competitively against some very mature heritage brands in the Premier League. And our goal and our mandate and remit was to go out and start to again develop the club from a global brand perspective and start to align with partners that would see value in the strategy that we were deploying and the direction of travel that we were on. But again, it was a great time. Manchester City, great people, smart people. We had a great group there. Tom Glick, who again I count as a friend to this day and a mentor and someone I hugely respect and admire. Lots of really smart people at the club doing really creative different things. So it was a great time. And as you know, one of my closest and best colleagues at City is a guy called Stefan Sipolik, who I know you have a long and illustrious past with, but we were given freedom and latitude to go out into the market and try and craft amazing partnerships that were value additive to our growing global fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. Stefan is a great guy. Spent many years with us at TSA in his early days, coming straight from Germany.
Well, you certainly instilled a great work ethic and an unbelievable ability to connect with people. So he has nothing but amazing things to say about his time with you, Marcus. So as you know, he's a great character.
Yeah, no, that's nice to hear. And now Stefan is a great guy, and I know you had an amazing career with you, not with you, not so much with City. And obviously, I think recently left, but he's definitely enjoyed his time there as well. Now let's talk about City then, because City is not just City, right? There's a whole bunch of cities on the back of it, and I think you were a bit part of that growth where it went beyond just being the Manchester City club, of course, on its own. And I'm assuming that was always somewhat part, I guess, of the strategy, that it was really a multifaceted group. That's why it's called City Football Group, which you went into then later on. So, talk us a bit through this. What I've saw is that they now have 12 clubs, and maybe during your time it was a little less than that. But everything, we're talking New York City, Melbourne City. You have the Yokohama Mariners, which is obviously near Tokyo. You have Mumbai City. You have a club in China. You have a team in Spain, Italy, and a few others. So, I mean, it's just huge diversity. Just talk us through from what you know, being inside the club. What was the strategy behind it, really?
Yeah, I guess it was effectively the sort of brainchild of Ferran, who again is a hugely impressive leader, intellectually formidable. And, actually, if you read his book that he wrote during his time at Barcelona, you actually see some of the seeds of City Football Group germinating from his time there, because I think he was trying to buy an MLS franchise in Miami or New York. I can't remember which city, but he certainly felt that there was space in the global football industry to create a truly global network of clubs. Mm-hmm. And clearly, at Barcelona, that was probably a little bit more challenging to deliver, given the makeup of the membership base and the way that the club is structured and formed. Obviously, at Manchester City and with City Football Group, and it was a case of convincing and showcasing to the ownership that this strategy had significant footballing and commercial value, which it does. So when I joined in 2013, probably about a year in, the first acquisition investment was made with New York City. So the club acquired the franchise to own and operate New York City, which went on to actually win MLS Cup last year after a number of years. But so New York was the kind of first investment, and then quickly thereafter Melbourne, and then it started to evolve and capture clubs in these different geographies. And I think there is slightly different motivations and ambitions for each of the investment, but ultimately it's about creating knowledge, expertise at the center, which can support the growth and development of each of these clubs. And the reality is each of the clubs is at different stages of its evolution, right? So in Manchester, you have a brand and a club that's over 100 years old and has rich history, whereas in New York, you are literally creating a club from scratch, brand, team. In India, which I obviously had a lot of exposure and involvement in, the league is still pretty nascent. It's 8 years old. So you have these clubs at different stages in their histories, and each has different requirements. Again, some operate in salary capped environments, some operate in free markets. So, but there is so much knowledge, expertise right across the spectrum of skill sets and functions that you need to operate football clubs, whether that's clearly on the sporting side. So CFG has, I think, something like 60 plus scouts around the world. Originally, when they were hired, they were focused on Manchester City. Now they have 12 clubs. Actually, Manchester City or City Football Group just announced they acquired Palermo in Italy yesterday, which I think is the 12th club.
Correct.
So you have this sort of reservoir of knowledge and expertise that you could call upon to support the development of the clubs in the different regions. So from a commercial standpoint, Marcus, I think it was a really eloquent and well-shaped and well-crafted proposition, because you touched upon it a little bit before around how do you have a global property that regional markets buy into? Well, in some ways what CFG created was a bit, some of the best elements of Formula One, that you have this hugely powerful global platform in Manchester City and its reach and resonance that it has with 500 million plus fans around the world. But then if you're a North American centric business, you could activate with New York or Manchester City, or if you're an Asia business, we had a club in Japan that we were minority shareholders in, or China or India. So in effect, we could offer our partners, a sort of complete and pretty eloquent solution to their needs, whether it was global or regional or more biased to certain parts of the world. So I think that really resonated when we started to talk about the model of multi-club ownership and properties in key economic and footballing markets around the world. That really resonated with CEOs and CMOs or global directors of sponsorship, because they got it instantly, right? Again, as most people would do. So it really was for us the point of difference that enabled us to really accelerate and grow the commercial business in Manchester, but also accelerate the growth of these other clubs that we'd invested into, to the point of Manchester City. Obviously, they again topped the Deloitte Money League and were the number one revenue generating club. Some of that obviously a bit of a function of the COVID years and match day, but was testament, to that original vision and idea that Ferran had, that people rallied around, and again, exceptionally talented leadership with committed ownership, and it was a real pleasure to be part of that and hopefully contribute a little bit along the way.
No, and it makes, again, everything you're saying makes complete sense. And obviously, having always been a bit in touch with Stefan and seeing some of the deals you guys were doing here in the region, a lot of times the announcement was clear. It wasn't just about, Manchester City. It was always linked to then a Japanese brand who also did something with Yokohama, or Chinese brand, or an Indian brand, etc. And I think the creativity, it gives you guys to create and bundle things up in a different way, I think is pretty exciting. So I like that. I can see that being a sponsorship guy myself and having sold similar stuff over the years. I can see how that can be a bit of fun there. Maybe you have an example. This was relatively early on, but we were fortunate enough to secure Hayes, the global recruitment business, as a partner. And they were, I think, the creativity and innovation that Man City was starting to develop and show to the sort of business community was starting to shine through. But they absolutely bought into the vision of having relationships in these key markets. So they had a burgeoning business in North America. They had a business in Japan. So again, as we evolved our group and we sort of shared with them, this is the vision, they started to invest in and leverage relationships with the clubs around the world. So, I think at one point during our tenure, we had something like 25 to 30 brands that had multiple investments in different clubs. Nissan was obviously a big partner, given the investment we both had in the Merinos, but they recognized the power of the global sponsorship platform that we created. Obviously, Etihad, SAP was another brand that really recognized the ability to tell a narrative from kind of pitch to boardroom, utilizing their technology to help us run and operate better teams, both set on the pitch, but also the business environment. So, we were fortunate. We worked with some, really, really talented marketeers who could leverage and harness the power of the group. And again, from a property perspective, it really was a point of difference. So Ferran always, would tell a great story, because, for a number of years, City was the challenger brand, again, trying to break into, the established heritage kind of club space. And you can't just follow the same path, right? It's a bit like, Fran's analogy was the boat, right? And, the America's Cup, you can't kind of follow the same path as the boat in front, because you'll never catch up. So you had to take and chart a different course in order to accelerate your growth. And I think this innovative, different, unique approach of having a portfolio and group clubs really did resonate and attract a lot of brands into our universe. So it was a great time, and fortunate to do some incredible work and work with some fantastic brands and partners, and fortunately still close with a lot of the CEOs and CMOs that we worked with before to this day. So absolutely. I mean, like I said, I remember some of the numbers you guys were pulling here out of Asia, which was unbelievable. I know what Man U and some of, let's say, the sort of traditional big clubs were doing, but these were serious deals. Now, here one obvious question is, how do you break the pie into the right pieces. So if someone writes a check for, pick a number, $5 million, who gets what? Is that predetermined, or what is the formula?
That's a very smart question, Marcus, and one that we deliberated and debated ad nauseum at CFG. I mean, we finally got to a place. There was a bit of a ratio and mechanism that we would apply, but ultimately, I guess the key driver was around which assets and what was the value that each of the clubs was providing. But okay. I think there is no doubt that the ability to leverage Manchester City was advantageous and beneficial to, a Melbourne City, or in the case of the club that I was running during my last role at City, Mumbai City. So, yeah, it wasn't an exact science, but over time we got to a position that everyone was happy. Ultimately, we needed to make sure that the brand was happy with what assets and what the relationship looked like at that particular club. But we also needed to make sure that the CEOs at the club were happy. They were satisfied from an economic and a partnerships perspective. So not an exact science, but we started to apply a bit of rigor and sort of a ratio of money that would, I guess, go into the different buckets of the clubs.
And to some degree, it doesn't matter so much if when you own the club fully, right? But like you said, with Yokohama, I think you're not owned at 100%, right? So that's where it gets a little more complicated, I guess, when you have other partners in the pie, right?
Yes, yeah. There's a bit of kind of question about dilution of the revenue and how it's structured in terms of equity. But yeah, we actually did a pretty good job with the Yokohama. To your point, our business in APAC really was the engine room of our growth. And again, you'll know better than most. The sort of football business historically was kind of fixated on Southeast Asia because of the level of fanaticism, right, the support that originates out of Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, etc. But what we certainly experienced as it related to our business in Asia, it really started to pivot to North Asia, right? We were doing a lot of business in Japan, given our relationship with Nissan and the Merinos. We were doing a lot more business in China as China was starting to become, fixated with the global game. And Korea was a great market for us, and we had our first sleeve partner in Nexon Tire from there. So we started really to see a shift in opportunity and revenue from Southeast to North Asia over the time that I was certainly running the global partnerships business.
Yeah, I remember that. And again, it somewhat makes sense, right? The firepower out of North Asia in terms of economic power is obviously much stronger than South Asia, even though the fan base clearly is probably, from a fanatic point of view, yes, it's probably even bigger here. But clearly, the money isn't quite as strong here. So that all makes sense. Yeah. So you spent about 3-4 years here in Singapore in these various roles, and then you ended up at City Football India. Were you based in India, or were you running this from where?
Yeah, so I guess the rationale and the reason. So as City Football Group was starting to kind of evolve and permeate as a multi-club model, we felt at the group level it made sense as it relates to our partnerships business to kind of break it down into the 3 regions. So North America, obviously EMEA and APAC, and we wanted to have presence, expertise, boots on the ground in the different regions. So that's when I moved to Singapore to help establish the APAC business. And again, had a phenomenally talented group, Stefan, Sarah White and others who really knew the region, understood the cultural dynamics and nuance of, the size of the geography and the different markets. So established the business in Singapore. And then when I was running the global business, I actually stayed in Singapore. So, which seems ridiculous now, but I used to spend like 200 days of the year on the road traveling, going to our partners or prospects, which seems ludicrous in a post-COVID era. But so I was in Singapore actually for about 6 years. The last year and a half, I was commuting between Singapore and India. Clearly those years were impacted and affected by COVID. So when we acquired Mumbai City back in October of 19, it was kind of midway through the season, so we had a bit of a watching brief. So I spent sort of 6 months traveling between the two, and then got back to Singapore in March of 20, if my maths is right, and that's when kind of COVID hit and everyone was everyone was kind of imprisoned wherever they were, right, with no travel and everyone having more priorities in life to worry about. So, and then I went back to India, but we had the season behind closed doors in Goa, which was an interesting experience, operating a league and literally living in a biosecure bubble in Goa at the hotel, where the only place we could go is the hotel, the training ground, and the stadium. So,
India obviously got pretty hit hard. Not right at the beginning, but a bit later on during COVID. It obviously was a real mess there, and I'm sure that affected anything related to football there as well.
Yeah, I think we were the first sport in India, the Indian Super League, to operate in under the sort of shadow of COVID, and it was tough. We were getting tested every 2 days, and literally we'd sort of sectioned off a portion of a hotel, so we were isolated from any other visitors or guests. But it was a tough environment, but actually was a great experience, and we went on to win the league and the playoffs.
Now I have a question on the player side of things. I don't know if there's an example you have where a player, you nurture and identify in one of those clubs around the world, and now eventually he lands at the big one in city, Manchester City. Is that all a big part of it? That is just besides the branding, which we well covered, and I think everyone can get their head around it, that it makes complete sense and it's a great model. And if all these clubs can be also, let's say, on their own P&L level, be profitable or wash their nose, then it's fantastic value added to the whole ecosystem. It's very easy to see from let's say financial point of view. But what is it from a real playing point of view? Is that really happening? Do you see that? Is there some examples you have?
Yeah, I think probably the best examples, and Brian Marwood, who runs effectively the sort of football business for all the clubs outside of Manchester City. Brian, again, is a tremendously impressive guy, great experience, revered all around the world, tremendous operator and a great person. So he effectively kind of runs all of the football operations outside of Manchester. So I guess the examples the group I assume would probably referenced is Jack Harrison, who was signed. He was actually an English guy, but signed for New York City because he went through the collegiate system similar to I did many years ago, but clearly I wasn't as talented. He signed for New York City. Then he actually was acquired by Manchester City, but went out on a couple of loans, and then obviously was ultimately sold to Leeds United for a significant fee. So he kind of worked his way through the system and benefited from the group connectivity. The other one that was really successful was the Australian player Aaron Moy, who again played for our club in Australia, Melbourne City, was the best player in the A-League by a country mile. Manchester City then acquired him, and then again he went out on loan to a couple of places and was ultimately sold. I think it's difficult, right, because there's such a kind of jump in level and quality from playing for one of our teams, or one of City's teams in Australia or India to Manchester City, right? Manchester City is operating in such a narrow, small pool of talent that can go into that club and make a difference. But I think where the benefit has absolutely been realised is that you create these different clubs and pathways so that the players can develop and mature, and then you have an opportunity to move them from New York to Girona or to Troyes, but then ultimately as an asset you're able to materially and significantly grow that. So the economic upside of having a portfolio is actually very powerful, and it's a major part of the business that City Football Group has at its disposal now. So I think they've done a great job at that, and again under the tutelage and guidance of Brian, and now Omar Barada, who's been at the group and the club for a long period of time, is also heavily involved. It's a really smart business, and City have smart people running it that enables you to materially grow value and also create pathways for players that, with respect, other clubs can't, because they don't have that group philosophy. And ultimately, I guess, Marcus, that's why you're seeing there are a number of investment houses, VC groups, trying to replicate in some way, shape or form the CFG club portfolio model, both from a commercial standpoint, probably more from a sporting standpoint.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Yep, there are a few out there who sort of modeling it. I'm not saying they're as successful and or high profile as City was or is, but and it makes sense. What you're saying, it's not always the ultimate goal that everyone ends up having to land at Manchester City, but yes, you can go across the different clubs, and you still obviously as a player grow. And the group benefits from that, so that makes complete sense. I like it. I mean, like I said, it's fascinating, and definitely many people around the world, I'm sure, are watching it and trying to see how you learn from it. So, and you've been right in the middle of it. Now,
yeah, it was. I think the fun part again, which you realise when you have some perspective on your career a bit, Marcus, is that the ability to grow and build something is a lot of fun, right?
Yeah,
and we were fortunate as City again, given the commitment of the ownership and our leadership. They believed in the model, and we were given the freedom and latitude to go out and build and deliver something that's pretty special. And again, I think everyone at City, really smart people, but hugely dedicated and committed. And they've built a phenomenal business, which obviously is now hugely valuable, given, recent valuations. And I think it was a really smart and clever way to think about the business in a unique and innovative style. And for me, so the fun part was being part of a team that was able to go and build and deliver that. And I'm sure it will continue to grow and be even more successful given the quality and caliber of people under Khaldoon's leadership. It's really interesting business model that I'm sure many will continue to try and copy and look at and learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating space, and that's why we've been talking about it. Now, and this is a good segue into it as well. Now, when you're looking at the timing here in the sort of middle of 2021 here, we're sort of still, in the middle of COVID to some degree, and many of us, including myself, we're looking at our traditional world of sports and going, it's hurting, right? And it still is somewhat, obviously, just slowly coming out of it. But the world of gaming and esports was growing like crazy. And every other day there's a story about the next big, $1 billion deal or other things growing with massive numbers globally around the world. And I'm assuming some of that attracted you, or maybe, maybe there was a different reason, but that clearly is what attracted me to the space several years back. And that's why we're in there now. So I own, actually, when I say we as a group own several esports teams playing different type of sports here. We have a gaming platform in Asia. And the part I love most about it, that it wasn't relying on, physical activities. We can, gaming is very an online game in aspect to some degree, right? And so that was really what I loved about it. How did you end up then into EA, which is obviously what we want to talk about now? How did you make that transition here?
Yeah, it was obviously a brand and an organization that I had pretty good proximity to, given the various rights holders that I was fortunate enough to work for over the years. So I think I had a partnership with EA dating back to my time at Rangers, and then obviously Chelsea and Man City. And so I'd always knew the business and the organization. I kind of had a good exposure to them. And from the outside looking in, it always felt like a great business and a great culture, again, with populated by really smart people. So, it was one of the few non-club related, I guess, businesses that always had a bit of an attraction and appeal for me. And as I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do, both personally and professionally, and where the family was going to be based after our amazing experience in Asia, there was an opening, an opportunity, as EA was starting to try and think a bit more purposefully around kind of what the opportunity for esports looked like. So, I joined the business last July. And I guess, coming up for just a year now and a couple of weeks. And it's been, a really, really interesting, exciting and kind of informative journey. Again, totally different scale of business. Most football clubs are relatively small in revenue perspective and terms, right? And relatively small organizations. And you go to a business like EA that's, 13,000 people around the world and, $8-9 billion turnover. It's a huge organization. And then you have some of the complexities of COVID and not being in an office, which makes it more challenging. But they certainly, the sort of underlying ethos and ambition for EA is kind of utilizing play and obviously playing video games, amazing video games, have a world-class portfolio of intellectual property, but encouraging, inspiring the world to play games, right? Because when that happens, kind of the magic happens, right? People are creative, satisfied, it's happy, excited, it really is a phenomenal business that enjoyed, significant growth during the challenging times of COVID, because to your point, people weren't able to meet in person, therefore utilizing technology and media to be able to play and interact with your friends and family from around the world was something that people really relied on, I think, to, keep them sane and safe and, on an even keel. So yeah, the business really enjoyed some unprecedented growth during COVID. And what the business is still trying to figure out a little bit is how they think about esports. I think part of the challenge a little bit as I've learned, because I've had to learn a new industry and a new space, is I think all the major publishers wrestle a little bit, and you'll probably know this again from your experiences, is esports a vehicle in service of the brand, the overall game,
correct,
or should it be a standalone P&L? And I think that thinking has probably fluctuated over the years, with most of the publishers. And I think ultimately that's why there is a number of people from our universe that have kind of gravitated into the world of gaming and esports, because it's still clearly a huge business, but it's still pretty embryonic and nascent when you look at it in the grand scheme of revenue generating properties around the world. But there is absolutely no doubt that it is a juggernaut and will continue to be that. I think it probably just needs to figure out how you drive value from the audience, and you ultimately add value to that audience, right? And I think that's the bit that, again, based on my limited experience in the space, I think people still struggle with a little bit, whether that's esports teams or the publishers or the tournament operators. So yeah, it'd be interesting to get your view, given your obviously intimate experience in the space now.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about it, but at first I want to just make sure that everyone understands when they hear EA, Electronic Arts, because I think for most people, the first thing they will think of is FIFA, which is probably potentially the most famous game they have, at least, let's say, for the sporting world, the groups, our traditional world of sports here. But there's obviously a ton of other games, which, again, not everyone would know. One of the bigger ones is Apex Legends, which is a huge game. I've seen other things like Battlefield, The Sims. Obviously, you have other sports-related ones with Madden, NFL. I think there's some NHL games as well. I think there's even something with the NBA. So there's a whole range of things. Which part are you involved in? Are you working across all of it, or are you very specifically on a particular game, or what's your current role there?
Yeah, you're right. EA has, I guess, heritage and history, and its positioning as it's always been the undoubted market leader in sports simulation games. And clearly, to your point, our FIFA franchise is kind of generation defining, culturally iconic, hugely, profoundly connected to players around the world now. So, and then you're right, Madden, NHL, F1, any sports simulation game of note really is an EA title. And then, as you referenced, there are a number of other sort of genres of games that we make, and Battlefield and Sims and Apex. Actually, I'm off to Raleigh in North Carolina on Thursday, because Apex has a big esports event, their global series finale there. So
actually, we have a team there.
Yes. All right. Great. Well, you'll need to connect me with your guys. I'll say hello and wish them good luck. So I kind of joined the business to focus on the esports verticals, and effectively there are three currently, obviously FIFA, Apex, and Madden. Again, of those three, I guess FIFA is the one that has most global relevance and opportunity, but Apex has this, significant momentum and energy behind it now, and is growing, really at a rapid rate of knots in terms of popularity and engagement around the world. So I was kind of brought in to kind of think about the commercial strategy and plan around our esports verticals. The slight challenge with the football business is that, it's the most licensed IP in the world. We have something like 350 licenses around the world. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's not quite the same as some of our competitors who effectively own the IP and can do anything they want with it. There are much more complexities and nuance around leveraging our football business, given all the relationships that are, many, many years and deep across the world. So I was brought in to build out a kind of commercial strategy plan across esports from a, potentially franchise opportunity, media rights, sponsorship, licensing events. But a lot of that obviously was put on ice during COVID because it was challenging to kind of deliver against some of that.
So, because their role is VP partnership. So, again, immediately out, the first thing I would think of is your job is bring in partners, as in sponsors, or whatever we're going to call them, commercial partners into the game.
Yeah.
Is that part of it? Or, like you said earlier as well, part of it is also to further develop what people would refer to now as esports, which are big tournaments, and maybe again they're and that's the part I like most about when I first went into this whole gaming esports space, is that there is plenty of synergies with our old world, right? There are events, there are players, there are teams, there is content. So the monetization models are again somewhat similar, and in some cases I would say traditional sports is much further developed in the commercialization side of it, right? The numbers we pull in, esports can pull from viewerships are huge, but it doesn't mean it generates necessarily the same amount of dollars, especially in the TV space, right? Because most of these obviously stream for free, so it's completely different models there in many cases. But like I said, teams have sponsors on the jersey, and and you have individual players, and whether they're influencers or streamers, can generate millions of dollars, of course, around it. So there is a lot of those things which you can compare to athletes and teams in general. But so which exactly is sort of your current remit there in that sense?
Yeah, it's a really personal
or work in progress.
I mean, I think initially certainly the plan and ambition was to build out our esports business. So in kind of totality around building out effectively a property akin to the sports model, that you had multiple revenue streams that you could leverage. I think where the business is at the moment, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic that I've had to wrap my head around, Marcus, is that it's trying to kind of figure out the right way to integrate brands into the entire ecosystem. So not just esports, but into the game environment, into the mobile platforms. And that's, complex because of the development times involved in producing these, blockbuster titles and franchises, which are, years in the making often. So, and I think you're right, there's a lot of synergy and similarity and parallels between sport and esports and gaming, but clearly totally different audiences. And there's a way that I think that you have to approach it in the gaming esports genre, because you have to be very respectful of that relationship that the players have with the game and the title, right? As you do in real sport, but I think it's the sensitivity is maybe even greater given the options that younger players and demographics have at their disposal. So we are trying to kind of figure out now what's the right approach to brand partners showing up in kind of the various ecosystems around our key core franchises. I think the interesting part, which you touched upon, is actually it's such an attractive and powerful platform for brands because of the level of, to your point, audience engagement. The profile of the audience is hugely attractive and in the sweet spot for most brands, young, well-educated, high disposable income, high propensity to technology, all the sort of boxes that you would want to tick as a property, esports and gaming has at its disposal in a way that arguably sports doesn't. I think I was speaking to someone a few weeks ago and they sort of described it, which I thought was really eloquent, that, in some ways, gaming has kind of cracked the code with the sort of B2C relationship because of obviously the connectivity that a player has to the game. You understand how frequently they play, the ability to create value from that relationship that, the publishers have done a phenomenal job at, but actually they haven't quite cracked the code on the B2B part of how do you work with brands that really can come into the space and add value. And I thought it was an interesting way to think about it because I hadn't sort of thought about it through that lens, but I thought it was quite an eloquent way to think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for improvement for sure. And I see it every day. When we talk to brands about our teams or the platforms, there's an unbelievable amount of education. It literally reminds me 25 years ago when we started selling sports sponsorship deals or doing sports marketing in Asia. You were basically explaining the basic concept before you were ever getting into why they should spend $1 there. And I think that's sort of, it feels now what we're doing right now in the world of esports, that the brands sometimes just have no idea. And it's quite a funny little story. One of our major sponsors right now on our team here, we have a partnership with PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, with a club here, with a game we play. And at the very beginning, everyone thought we were doing some sort of five-a-side futsal or something until they realized, no, we're playing a completely different game. We're playing a mobile game, nothing to do whatsoever with football besides that our partner in this case is Paris Saint-Germain as a brand, right? So that's just a great example of how how people still really trying to get their head around. And the world of gaming is so broad as well, right? If you take FIFA as a traditional, let's call it world of football there, versus your Apex Legend game, which is a battle royale game, which is completely different, right? Is a shooter game, if we want to call it brutally what it is, and for brands to appreciate it, B, understand it, the power or the difference between those things is not as simple right now. Again, part of your journey here now being inside of that, again, this is just my experience, what I've seen. FIFA is as popular as it is and hugely successful, of course, as its own brand, as its own FIFA game. It also has limitations in many parts of the world. If you look at really what are the biggest games around the world, they're not traditional sports related products, right? Whether even NBA 2K or other things like this. Yes, they're popular and they have their audiences, but if you really compare it to the biggest of the biggest, whether it's League of Legends or Dota 2 or whatever, CSGO, they are fairly small. How do what do you think you can change that, or this is just what it is?
It's a really interesting question and debate. I think clearly what we have with our future with our football franchise is that it's the beauty of general football too, right, or real world football, is it's easy, the simplicity. It's the same. I know you had Scott Levy on here recently talking about the NBA's growth and the phenomenal job that he and the NBA have done in Asia. The simplicity of those two sports is they're very easy to understand. Now, I think that sort of rings true to a certain extent for sports simulation games, and it's probably a little bit easier for someone to pick up the sticks and the controllers and play FIFA or F1 because it mirrors real world sport. Whereas, unless you've grown up in this generation, or someone has educated you on the rules of League of Legends or Dota, etc., it's a little bit harder. I think some of the scale questions that you rightly, or the scale of those games and player base is a little driven by the economics behind them too, right? Obviously, some are free to play, some are mobile centric or rooted or in the mobile platform. And I think actually that's where part of the exciting opportunity exists for EA, certainly as it relates to its future facing football franchise, is that the ability to bring the experience to more players around the world on different platforms in ways that it maybe hasn't historically. And I think this is the opportunity now, is to take the game into even more spaces and places in the world than it already occupies, and give people the EA football experience, because it really is kind of blurring the lines between the real and the digital. And I think again, when you look at the statistics and the numbers, the level of engagement that the franchise has is phenomenal. Again, most sports properties would absolutely crave and desire the level of
you have some numbers you can share. What is sort of public in terms of how many players you have and how many, let's say, daily users, etc. Do you have some numbers at the top of your head?
The global player base for the FIFA franchise is about 150 million. And again, they consume. I think there was a statistic that we looked at a few weeks ago and were amazed by it. It's something like the level of engagement is they spend as much time, our players, a large portion of the players, it would equate to them being like attending 5 seasons worth of Premier League football matches over the course of the year, if that makes sense.
Wow.
So it was like ridiculous levels of engagement and consumption. Yeah. It's and again the depth and insight and intelligence that that the publishers have, and EA certainly does, on its player base is unrivaled. Which consoles, which platforms they're playing on, what times they're playing, which players they're selecting, which teams they're selecting, which stadium venues, who are the favorite players, how they're potentially purchasing FIFA Ultimate Team, which payment platform. Again, that type of insight is not particularly common in the traditional sports environment, because the relationship is somewhat different, right? So I think the world of gaming and esports has a hugely exciting future. I do think it needs to be, to your point, demystified a little bit, and I think it just needs a bit of time to continue to mature and develop. But I have no doubt that it's here to stay and will only increase in relevance. Again, those of us that have kids only need to look at the behaviours of our children and how they're consuming media and sport and entertainment to see that the world is definitely changing for good and bad, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had Pete Vlastelica, I think his last name. He was at that time the president and CEO of Activision Blizzard Esports. So and he helped build the Overwatch and Call of Duty League, and we went in a lot of detail of how they build it, how they model it after the NBA and other parts to bring the ownerships in, and etc. Is that something you guys are looking at as well, trying to build something similar of that level now? If you think of football again, it could be an easy one, or especially with the sort of departure to FIFA, which maybe it means when it comes to football, you can be a little more flexible, or you can do different things.
Yeah, I think it was certainly part of the thinking, Marcus, that, seeing the success that some of our competitive set have enjoyed in the space, it's certainly stimulated a lot of conversation and debate at EA. And again, I think the model and the approach has value. And I think, those that innovate first enjoy sometimes the benefit and also clearly the pain of that innovation. So I think there is a lot of learnings you could take from those properties and what they've created and what they've achieved. But I do think football and EA's football franchise has an opportunity to do things in a way that I can't, because of the popularity of the game and global football. But it is much more complicated and complex because it's so heavily licensed and reliant on our amazing partners in the Premier League, or La Liga, or Bundesliga, or MLS, etc. So it does come with a level of complexity that no one else has to really think about in this space.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's why it maybe ends up being maybe one of the other games where you would have to do it with. I can see that in the FIFA, in the football world, it's hard. Now, fantastic. I mean, we could keep going on and on here, but since it's obviously still a new role for you as well, I guess you're somewhat also still learning the ropes there. So hopefully we can pick it up again, and in the future here. But obviously we need to, and again you share what you can share with the obviously fairly public split with FIFA. What can you share a bit? What is the company line on it?
Yeah, clearly it's now in the public domain that after a phenomenal 30-year ride together, that our separate ways from FIFA after the end of the next iteration of the game, so FIFA 23. Mm-hmm. I think, look, it has been ultimately a phenomenal relationship that's massively benefited both parties. FIFA have been phenomenal partners. And I think we've been phenomenal partners to them, right? We've created, again, the sort of generation-defining sports game, arguably video game, that has done a tremendous job at elevating the profile of FIFA and its tournaments and the game of football. So I think it's been, ultimately and fundamentally, it's been a wonderful partnership. But I think we believe that, now is the time to pursue a different path. And we think, that we're doing this from a position of strength. We've created the most, again, iconic, played, consumed, talked about video game in the world. And we want to be able to be in a position to take that game and that brand and that experience to more players. We want to be able to innovate and craft and shape our own destiny in a way that maybe wasn't possible before. So, we believe that the future's bright for global football. We think that EA is the future of interactive football as its kind of market position reinforces. And the reality is, I think that the game and the experience will continue to evolve and develop and become even better and bigger and more powerful than it already is. So I think everyone at EA is, ultimately committed to making sure that our final year of our partnership with FIFA is a tremendous one, and we go out on a high and make it the best game ever. And then I think we're really excited about what the future can bring and our ability to take the brand into places and spaces maybe that it hasn't been able to in the past. So it's going to be, I think clearly it's going to be an interesting 12, 18 months, but I think everyone has said is really excited about what the future holds for the future of our football franchise. And we can't wait
already? Is there like EA Football, or what are you going to call it, or not yet?
Yeah, EA Sports FC is the brand that we and all our partners across global football are rallied behind, and we're excited to bring this to life in more meaningful, impactful ways than ever.
And so, again, let me just make sure I get this right now, because within the game itself, as you rightly said, you have hundreds of licenses with the actual clubs, and maybe in some cases even directly with players, right? So that will obviously continue. There's really none of that has anything to do with FIFA anyway, right? FIFA was the sort of umbrella there, I guess, lending its name and maybe other elements to it, maybe, access, I guess, to the World Cup, maybe rights there. But the rest, these relationships will continue, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, correct. The reality is nothing really changes in terms of the game. To your point, we enjoy, amazing relationships with leagues, federations, clubs, players, FIFA Pro, all the organisations. Those continue and are locked in for a long runway now. So nothing changes ultimately other than the brand. So. If you're kids or players, nothing changes, and ultimately, I think we'll be able to same game modes, same FIFA Ultimate Team, same Volta, all the things that players love currently will be there in our new universe, just under a different guise. And I said ultimately, I think it will further fuel innovation, creativity, more platforms, more ways to experience the game than ever before. So we're I think, as I said, without labouring the point, we're really excited about what the future holds, and we believe that the game will just go from strength to strength. And also, I think one of the things that I've really appreciated and realised and recognised, given again the power of the game. And the title, particularly, among a slightly younger audience, is that, the organisation is hugely committed to diversity, inclusion. It's hugely committed to women's football. I don't know if you've seen some of the campaigns that they ran around Ramadan. I mean, really leveraging and harnessing the power of the game to drive positive change globally is something that the business is committed to. And I think you'll just see even more of that in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to be honest, I'll say it out loud. I think the loser on this is FIFA. I can see that for EA, there is, as you said, maybe not that much change. It has a change of name. But for FIFA trying to rebuild this, which is obviously sort of their side of the story, from the sound of it at least, I think it'd be tough. So, interesting. Good luck to everyone, I guess, on that one. We'll watch and see from the sideline.
We wish them nothing but success. I said, I'm sure they'll continue to, go from strength to strength. But we're excited about our future and what we can control. And can't wait to kind of see what the future holds for us.
Absolutely. Now, last one here, and it's sort of just a fun one to wrap it up with, and again, links to your game, to FIFA, the game here. This is probably now is 2 years ago, maybe roughly, if I remember. We had this crazy promotion which Burger King did with this club called Stevenage Football Club. Right, which was a second division league team in the UK somewhere, and on the back of it, obviously they created this incredible. I don't know how they did it. I'm trying to remember now the story behind it, but it was everywhere, right? And everyone ended up wearing the, showing the jersey, and the Ronaldos of the world ended up in the game. Now. Again, I think it was before you obviously joined, but I'm assuming you're somewhat maybe aware of it, and maybe you can talk a bit about it from your perspective. How did they manage to sort of hijack this, and what a great way of doing it, I think, right?
Yeah, I think, kudos to Stevenage and Burger King. I think effectively all they really did was creatively think about ways to harness the power of the game. So Given the breadth of the license agreements we have in place, obviously Stevenage was featured in the game, so essentially they constructed a partnership where they're on the front of the shirt in real life, which manifested in the game.
Correct.
And then they just used a really, again, eloquent and creative approach to marketing that and rewarding players to select and use Stevenage as their club. So it's sort of infused this sort of massive energy and focus around Stevenage, and then the FIFA community sort of embraced it and rewarded for selecting the club, and it just kind of created this tidal wave of interest and exposure and excitement around the partnership. Again, I think it was just a creative way to leverage and harness the power that the game has. So you were rewarded, you got free meals or prizes, and there were benefits for selecting Stevenage players and Stevenage as a club rather into the game. So it's really, it really kind of captured the imagination of the FIFA community globally, and obviously did a great job at elevating the profile of Stevenage to the extent that we're talking about them, and then obviously Burger King benefited as a brand. So just creative thinking that really leveraged the depth and breadth of the FIFA community globally. So I'm sure we'll see more stuff like that. And again, in a world where there is a bit more free and clear ocean, I think we'll see brands creatively integrated into the game, and ultimately, that add value and bring value to the players and the fans. Because, a bit like real world sport, as we were talking about, ultimately the fans sounds a bit cliche, but not meant to be. Fans are the lifeblood of any organisation and entity, and it's about how you manage and look after them, which is the most important thing. So
absolutely. No, and I think, again, it's just a great example of obviously first, really creative thinking, and then extremely well executed as well, that it took off, and it really became, went viral in many ways around the world. And that's the part I like, that it is, again, it's all virtual. It reaches a huge, massive audience. And I think that's what we're talking about here now at the end anyway, how video gaming or gaming in general, how huge it is, and there's amazing audiences which exist around the world, which brands want to come closer to and trying to figure it out. Right? And there are many interesting tricks. This is an indirect approach, of course, not working with EA necessarily directly, but being clever around it. But there are many other ways how brands can work with you, of course, directly and engage with the games and the platforms you guys are having. So should be a fun time there, Damian. So good luck there with that role. I'm sure we'll talk some more.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And enjoyed it here. Yeah, enjoyed going through this and hearing your learnings and the different stops in your career there. So, enjoy the rest of the day there in London, and we'll talk again soon.
Marcus, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk. Really enjoyed it, and good luck with the upcoming game in Bangkok. I'm sure it'll be an amazing spectacle and event, and you can satisfy the thirst and hunger of the football fans in Thailand with the event. So good luck with it, and look forward to hopefully seeing you in London at some point.
Definitely appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.